Hello, welcome to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading 1 Samuel chapter 22. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him, and every one that was in distress, and every one that was in debt, and every one that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. And David went thence to Mizpeh of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. And the prophet Gad said unto David, Abide not in the hold, depart, and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed, and came into the forest of Hereth. When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? That all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that sheweth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or sheweth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me, to lie in wait, as at this day? Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son in law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father. For thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn, and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled, and did not shew it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, Turn thou, and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 85 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar shewed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priests. And David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, but with me thou shalt be safe. Thou shalt be in safeguard. Almost right. Summarizing 1 Samuel chapter 22. At the end of 21, David flees to King Achish, who is the ruler of the territory Gath. King Achish's servants make David nervous, so he pretends to be crazy. So that's where we're leaving off of. Verse 1, David left the territory of Gath and escaped to a cave Adullam. His relatives hear where he's at, about 400 of them, and they meet David, and David becomes their leader. Verse 2 describes the condition of these people: in distress, in debt, discontented. So I'd like for us to review 1 Samuel chapter 8 and just some details for a moment to illustrate why these people might have been in this condition. 1 Samuel chapter 8, Israel demands a new king. And when we look at verses 5 and 20, they want to be like the nations around them. Okay, so I just need to add in here that I never addressed how First Samuel chapter 8 relates to First Samuel chapter 22, because we're at this part. Everyone that was in distress and everyone that was in debt gathered themselves unto him. The reason why they're probably in that state is because in verse 10, after Israel demands a king, Samuel tells them, okay, if you get a king, he's going to make you miserable. So from verse 10 to verse 18, Samuel is explaining to them, he's going to take your stuff. You're going to cry out because of your king. So now David's in a cave. He could use some support probably from attempted murder 3 different times and an unsupportive uh, help, other incidents that probably aren't encouraging, put it like that. Now, when he's in a cave, at his lowest point, the only people that are going to come around him are people that are in debt and in distress. And most likely, because of this prophecy in verse 10, uh, 1 Samuel chapter 8 being fulfilled. The reason why the story of Saul and this transition of power is so significant is because they want to be like the nations that God told them to drive out. Israel was enslaved for 400 years. The generation that was enslaved escaped under Moses' leadership, and they were in the wilderness. After that, there's a second generation that came, and the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is warning them of the experiences of their parents. Joshua leads that second generation into the promised land. Once they get into the promised land in Judges chapter 1, it's clear that they have a direct connection with God. They ask God, who should go to fight for us against the Canaanites, the people that we were commanded to drive out? God gives them an answer. God doesn't give them a leader. After Joshua's death, he doesn't appoint anyone else to be a leader over Israel. That line of communication was open with God, but these people, they didn't follow God's command. They knew God commanded them to drive these people out because in Leviticus chapter 18, these people were making the land sick. And the land was so sick, Israel wasn't going to be able to eat off this land for 5 years once they got there. So when they failed to complete that generation that was under Joshua's leadership for a while, and then Joshua died, those people did not follow God's command of driving these people out. And in chapter 2, an angel confronts them and tells them, you didn't keep God's command. Don't you understand? This is going to be a problem for you now. These people don't try to fix it. They don't complete God's command even after the angel tells them. So that generation dies out. Then you have a new generation, and they turn to idol worship. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal is because all of this is pointing to God wanting them to have their own lead themselves and have a direct, open connection to God. But they're a new group of people. We have to understand it's because of God's favor and it's because of God that they were able to gain control of this land anyway and defeat these peoples around them. But not adhering to him meant that they're not going to take the attention that they should be having to build their own kingdom, and they're going to be spent looking at these other cultures around them who have had enough time to be developed enough to make the land sick. So because Israel is such a young group of people in a territory that's surrounded by people who are well developed and they have their own culture and style and religions, this new group of people who don't have the experience of Joshua's leadership, they don't quite understand the severity of not keeping God's commands. They weren't alive to experience it. And because their parents didn't do what God told them to do in Judges chapter 1, they probably didn't emphasize how important it was to keep God's commands because they themselves didn't keep God's command. So now you have this group of people who they have a very young kingdom. They've been free a shorter amount of time than they've been slaves. Their parents didn't communicate things correctly to them. Moses didn't communicate everything correctly to them in the book of Deuteronomy. Their parents didn't keep God's command, and they left them with this kingdom that and this brand new culture, this brand new kingdom that they need to sow life into and dedicate themselves to God and to their own culture to build up to be strong. But instead of doing that, they fell into idol worship because the people around them were more developed. So now they want the leadership, they want the kind of nation that these people had instead of having that open relationship to God that they had in Judges chapter 1. The reason why God had to begin assigning judges or assigning leaders anyway is because Israel wouldn't learn how to self govern with just God being their leader. So they would go into idol worship with these other people. They would get into subjugation because, again, these are not their culture. They're not supposed to be in these other people's cultures. They're not supposed to serve these other people's gods. So, part of inserting yourself into a culture that isn't meant for you, you're not going to be at the top of that culture. You're going to be subjugated in that culture because it's not yours. So, God has to now assign leadership. Whereas when they first got there, they didn't have leadership. So now that God is assigning leadership and God is assigning them, He's with these people. They're a direct pipeline, just like Moses and Joshua. But now Israel doesn't want that either. Now they want to look at these other nations and we want a king to be like these other nations. The judges that you're giving us are not good enough. So while Israel is unfaithful, you have to understand Moses in the book of Deuteronomy did not communicate everything the way he was supposed to. Their parents didn't keep God's command by driving these people out. So now you got this new group. Okay. So the reason why I am bringing this up, because now we are in 1 Samuel chapter 22, David is going to be the king after Saul. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, they want a king to emulate the nations around them. And so God gives them a king. God tells Samuel, who's the judge, help them get what they want and finds King Saul. King Saul proves to be cowardly. He proves to not take the things of God seriously. He doesn't take God's commands seriously. So God anoints David to be king. But Saul is so severely jealous that he tries to kill David. The Bible even says Saul knows that God is with David. Every task that he's given David to do, he has been nothing but respectful. He's earned the respect of everyone so far. Even King Saul's children. King Saul's daughter married him and loved him, and King Saul's son is his best friend. King Saul tried to kill Jonathan because of his loyalty to David. David is an employee of King Saul, and he's anointed to be the new king. But he's having to run now. And now he's in a cave. And a man like this, who has done the best job he can do, who risked his life defeating Goliath, who risked his life again fighting the Philistines and being victorious, just for doing a good job, his boss wants to kill him. So after fleeing, he now has to go to a cave, and the only support that he has are from people who are in distress, in debt, discontented. Okay, just want to give a clear picture of what's happening here. Verses 3 and 4. David asked King Mizpeh of Moab to allow his family to stay in that territory while David decides his next move. David stayed in what's called the stronghold, in the hold, stronghold. Okay. That's one reason why I like Bible Ref, because you can click on a verse and you can see 7 translations on the screen at the same time and compare them. So that's some of the ways I'm able to know, what these words mean, because my Bible is King James version, you know. Okay. When we look up stronghold, um fortified place of security, okay? But synonyms for stronghold are a fort, bunker, garrison house. So we saw the word garrison used in 1 Samuel chapter 13. King Saul's son Jonathan attacked that military structure of the Philistines. And so uh, even Jonathan made Saul look bad, because under King Saul's leadership, the other Israelites fled in 1 Samuel 13 and were hiding in graveyards to try to get away from the wrath of the Philistines. It wasn't until the next chapter, Jonathan attacks again, is successful against the Philistines, and he inspires all of these men who ran in the previous chapter to realign under King Saul's leadership. So King Saul, even in that chapter, 1 Samuel 14, had this, egotistical response of wanting to hunt the Philistines until there are no more left. Again, demonstrating he's not a very good person to deal with his insecurities. And he brings his insecurities to work. He lets it affect how he works. So let's just understand that sometimes it's in the Bible where a manager who is dealing with insecurities brings his insecurities to work with him and lets it affect how he works. Okay? All right. So David's in the cave. His relatives come. David takes his relatives to this new king while he stays in the stronghold. Then we get to verse 5. A prophet Gad told David to leave and go to Judah. So David listened to him. Verses 6 through 8. Saul hears that David has been discovered. He confronts his officials. And when we look in verse 7, he's saying this in sort of a flippant way, Will this David, as Jesse is David's father, will this son of Jesse give you fields and vineyards? Can he give you any power? Can he make you command over something? All of you have conspired against me. You don't even feel sorry for me, that my son Jonathan doesn't respect me enough to have loyalty to me. So then you have the brown noser, Doeg, the Edomite. And Edomite, or Edom, is a descendant of Esau. Once again, Genesis chapter 36, verse 8 lists Esau is Edom. So another descendant of Esau. The Amalekites are also a descendant of Esau, descendants of Esau. So Doeg tells Saul, after hearing Saul confront these officials and, oh, none of you care about me, Doeg said, I care about you. And I was at the temple and I saw David. The priest gave him food, gave him Goliath's sword, and inquired of the Lord for him. So inquired of the Lord, consulted the Lord. Okay. So I just think that means pray for him. Uh, silly. I just saw that. Okay, asked, challenged, surveyed, questioned, quizzed. So talk to the Lord on his behalf. So after this, in verses 11 through 23, Saul calls for Ahimelech the priest and his male priest relatives. Saul tells them that he knows they fed David and gave him Goliath's weapon. Verse 14, Ahimelech tells Saul that David is the most honorable and faithful servant. He tells Saul that he has prayed for David multiple times. In verse 15, Ahimelech the priest asked Saul to consider him innocent because he didn't know anything about Saul's problem with David. And verse 16, the king tells priest Ahimelech that him and his family will die. Thou shalt surely die. Verse 17, Saul orders his officials to kill Ahimelech and his family. Verse 18, Saul's men will not kill the priests. So Saul tells Doeg, the brown noser, and Doeg turned Doeg the Edomite, the descendant of Edom, the descendant of Esau. He killed 85 priests, 85 persons, 85 men. Okay. And the ephod is the holy garment that priests wear, part of that uniform. It also says that Doeg smote Nob, the city of priests, and they killed men, women, children, and animals. In verse 20, Ahimelech the priest, one of his sons, Ahitub, okay, I'm sorry, Ahimelech is the son of Ahitub. One of the sons of Ahimelech, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. He told David what just happened, and David said, hang out with me, since Saul is after both of us. Well, that is what we have for 1 Samuel chapter 22. I really hope that this is starting to bring this to life some, because it certainly is for me. Thank you so much for clicking on the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Have a wonderful day.